This week, an interview with graphic novelist Chester Brown. Koom talked to him shortly after the Toronto International Film Festival premiere of the movie Paying for It, based on Brown's book of the same name. First, I'd like to thank our patrons for helping to keep the show going. You can pitch in by pledging at least $2 a month at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo. Before we get to Koom's talk with Chester Brown, just a few words of setup. In the interview, there's a lot of discussion about Brown's former romantic partner and still close friend, Suk Yin Lee, who is very famous in Canada for her various creative pursuits, including directing the Paying for It film. Now here's the interview.
It's Koom for the Deconstructing Comics podcast and Comic-Con.com. I'm here in Chester Brown's apartment in Toronto. Hi, Chester.
Hello, Koom.
So, you and I have known each other for some years, and I thought it might be interesting to do a different kind of interview than maybe you're used to and than what I usually get to do. So, first of all, congratulations on the Paying for It movie.
Thank you.
And it's getting great reviews from what I can tell.
Very good reviews. Yeah, I'm happy with the reviews. I think at this point there's like 25 of them, and only one of them is really negative.
What does it say?
Yeah, the complaints seemed a bit weird. What did it say? Something like Suk-Yin didn't... The presentation didn't feel feminist enough because Suk-Yin didn't really show herself as successful and as much of a celebrity as she was in real life.
Yeah.
And so she was kind of downplaying her success, or that was the feeling of the reviewer. And that she should have accented it and shown what an important part of Canadian culture she was. And I don't know, maybe that would have been a good thing. I do know that a scene was shot where someone asks her for a signature, and that maybe would have highlighted her celebrity status. And I was actually, Suk-Yin was like, "No, I'm going to take that scene out." And I was like, "Oh, why? Like, include it. It shows what our lives really were like then. Like, people were crowding around you and wanting you to sign things and talking to you." I remember a thing where we were on Spadina Avenue and a bunch of like teenagers or whatever recognized her and, were wanting her signature, and we're talking to her. And I was just kind of off to the side there, just kind of waiting for her to get done talking with them. And one of them kind of felt sorry for me, and he said something like, "Oh, I'm sure you're important too in your own way," or something like this, to try and make me feel. And it was not like I felt, because I felt that I was a success in my own way,
Yeah.
But of course, Suk-Yin was more the celebrity then.
Oh, what year would that have been, roughly?
Mid-90s. We moved back to Toronto for her to start at Much Music in probably late 94. So, and it would have been before what I consider to be the breakup of the romantic part of our relationship, which would have been in 97, I guess. So it might have been 95, 96, something like that.
Yeah. So for listeners, I think most listeners are going to know the source material, Paying for It, which came out in 2011, I believe.
Right.
So that's a memoir about you going from your breakup with Suk-Yin to deciding to see sex workers, and in the process of doing that, and then coming to the point where you decide to have an exclusive but paid relationship with the woman you call Denise.
Right.
And then Sukyin, many years later, has made a film, which you've been very involved with, based on that. And so just even thinking about that review, what's interesting is they're expecting a certain degree of authenticity and realism in regards to what potentially happened, which they're not seeing in the film.
Sorry, who's...
The negative review.
The negative review. Oh, yeah, I forgot we were talking about that negative review.
We're going to ramble a lot, I think.
Yeah.
But I just want to say, I think that was something I was thinking about, too, because while I was watching the movie, I really struggled with... I mean, you didn't even mention the name of the character in the film. You said the person that's supposed to be Sukyin in the film. So if it's easier... would it be okay if we just talk about the people's real names as opposed to, because I don't even know if I remember the characters' names in the film, and that was something that I really struggled with while watching the film, because I was like, well, that's not quite right, or and
yeah, but it's a film. You got to change some stuff. Like, there's the scene where Sukyin and the Denise character, Sunny in the film, and the Denise character confront each other. They actually meet. And of course, in a film, you gotta have those two characters meet. But of course, in real life, they didn't.
And to my understanding, they still haven't, because you keep that part of your life with Denise very compartmentalized.
Right.
Seth hasn't met her. To my understanding, nobody has met her, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so that's really interesting. And in the film, you have Denise over at the house, which you're sharing with Sukyin, which in real life didn't happen.
Right.
Not only that, but you have in the film a very glowing connection between yourself and the Denise character. Was that realistic at the time in the initial stages? I mean, to the point that she seems to want to have a relationship with you outside of her occupation.
She does?
In the film.
I guess. I mean, we go to... we're going out and doing stuff, spending, I guess, unpaid time together, where we go to a gallery towards... You're talking about before that?
I'm talking about the quality of the chemistry between the characters that are supposed to represent you and Denise. She constantly forgets to actually pick up the money.
That happened the first time, but it didn't happen after that.
It didn't happen more than once,
right.
Okay? And she just seems to glow. Now, I mean, I think that's partly due to the actor, Andrea Warren's skills.
Yeah.
And probably also to the fact that she had actual first-hand experience as a sex worker that she could bring to the role. But that aside, I think it's quite palpable in a way that's not quite there in the interactions with the Chester character and the other sex workers.
Right.
There is a nice connection with the Asian woman,
right.
But it gets appended by the fact that she doesn't keep the issue of Louie Riel that you give her. You find it not just discarded but torn,
right,
in the wreckage after. Cops do that.
I don't think it's supposed to be implied that the sex worker does that,
but there's a different quality of kind of romance in the connection with the Denise character. So I wasn't sure if that was really your intention or if that was Sukin's intention in terms of giving it a nice rosy ending that contrasts with her own character.
Yeah, I mean, in the film, you've got to telescope things. You can't show everything in a 21-year relationship. So, yeah, you're having to heighten that stuff at the beginning. Because I was about to say that at the beginning with Denise, it would have been the same as at the beginning with any of the other sex workers. But that's not really true, because I wanted to keep seeing Denise I saw her 2 times. The way you see it in the book is pretty accurate. I saw her 2 times, and then I saw another 2 sex workers. I didn't go from starting to see Denise, and then it was just Denise exclusively, I saw Denise a couple times, thought she was nice. And then I kind of, whatever, moved on, saw a couple other sex workers. And then, actually, yeah, I don't show it in the book. But in real life, I saw these other two sex workers. And then I was riding up Bathurst Street on my bike. Actually, I wasn't riding up. I was walking up Bathurst Street with my bike. And at the, is it Richmond? What is it? King, Richmond, then Adelaide? Or is it Adelaide and then Richmond? I think it's Richmond, then Adelaide, right?
Yeah, I think so.
At the corner of Adelaide, I saw Denise standing there. And she was obviously dressed to see a client. And I was thinking of saying hi. But I was unshaven right then. I was feeling kind of gross, and I was like, don't say hi. But it reminded me, oh, she was really wonderful. I should make an appointment to see her again. And so,
almost like an afterthought.
Yeah.
In the initial stages, yeah.
Right. And so then I called her up, and then it was like her from then on. Although she isn't the only sex worker I've paid for money since then. I go in the new material, the new extra 2024 material in the book. I describe how I did see a couple other sex workers subsequently after the initial edition of Paying for It was published. I can briefly explain. I ran into, this is probably, I think it would have been early 2013. I was walking along King Street, and there was some woman, a very attractive woman, but not dressed like a sex worker, just begging for change on the street. And I gave her a $5 bill and just continued walking and thought that's going to be the end of it. But this woman was like, oh, this guy is generous, $5 for just begging on the street. So she began following me and basically propositioned me. And she was really beautiful, and I was like, I couldn't resist. I was kind of feeling guilty, like, am I exclusive with Denise now, or am I not? And I'd actually already had a conversation with Denise where I asked if she would mind if I, got involved or had sex with another woman, and her answer had been, well, it's not going to happen, so why are we talking about this? And which didn't indicate anything one way or the other, whether she would care or not. But it sort of implied, anyway, whatever. I was sort of feeling like, should I? But it was impossible for me to say no. It was a really beautiful woman, and she was willing to have sex with me for only $40. So I went over to her place and, paid her the money, and then she left the apartment, and she said she'd be back in 10 minutes. I waited 10 minutes, and then I was like, what am I doing here? I'm just going home. So I described that encounter in much more detail in these extra notes here. So that would have been 2013, and then probably 2013, I think. And then about a year later, it had become obvious that Denise was fine if I saw someone else. So I actually did hire an escort then, who came to this very apartment, and I couldn't get it up. I think it was because I felt guilty that I was cheating on Denise. So that was the last time I tried to have sex with anyone else. Since then, it's just been me and Denise, and so that was 2014. So that was 10 years ago. Well, so
you know what I think? I think the money's been going the wrong way. I think these women should be paying you money because you're a world-renowned cartoonist for the privilege of spending time with you. No.
Yeah. I'm not saying that. And yeah, try and convince Denise that that's the way things should go. No.
Well, has Denise seen the film, and what does she think of it?
She has not seen the film. I had a +1 for the screening at TIFF. And I asked if she wanted to come with me, but I knew she was going to probably say no because, an attractive woman of the right age sitting next to me, like everyone's going to assume it's Denise. And she didn't want people knowing what she looks like and whatever, or correctly guessing that she's Denise. So she said, no, I'm not going to go. So I tried to buy an extra ticket for her at the TIFF Lightbox when tickets went on sale to the general public. Just buy a ticket for her so she could sit somewhere else in the theater and wouldn't be associated with me or with the production crew or anything like that. Just a seat isolated from everyone, kind of just randomly somewhere in the auditorium. But tickets were sold out, so I couldn't get one for her. So she did not go. And
do you think she would have wanted to go if you could have gotten such a ticket?
I think so. Yeah. And since then, she's seen the trailer, and I showed her the trailer, and she said, "Wow, don't take this the wrong way, but that's way better than I was expecting. It looks like a film I'd actually want to see, even if I wasn't a character in it."
Yeah, let me say, the film looks really great visually. Mm-hmm. So kudos to the cinematographer, kudos to Suk-in. It's cut really well. Yeah. So the filmmaking is great.
Anna Catley, the editor, did a great job. Gail Yee, the cinematographer, did a great job, and of course Suk-in.
Yeah.
The whole crew was amazing.
I just found myself unsure of how to respond to it because, as I've told you, even though I'm not really in your inner circle, I know you, and I have met Suk-in, and I know Seth to some degree, and I've certainly had interactions with Joe and so on, and so there were things that just I didn't really know how to make sense of. I should rewatch the film before committing myself to any opinions, but some of the sensibilities didn't always match up, or what it was kind of trying to say wasn't always that clear. And then the question of, does it actually match up with the authenticity of what's in your graphic novel? Also kind of, so for fans of comics, they probably would have a lot of questions. I mean, some of the obvious ones was the choice to make Seth black, and his name's Kane in the film, so he's got a different name, but it's really odd to see somebody who's black kind of talking in an officious manner and wearing suspenders and a whole ensemble, right?
Is it?
It's weird. It's really weird.
I don't know if it's weird or not. I thought Chris, the actor, I think his name's Sandiford, Chris Sandiford. I thought he did a great job. He's perfect in the role.
Do you mean perfect like he reminds you of Seth? Is that what you mean? Yeah, okay.
He feels like Seth to me in a way that Eli, what's Eli's last name again? Anyway, the actor who played Joe, the Joe character, whose name is Cecil in the film, Eli, I think he does a great job. I love the character in the film, but he doesn't feel like Joe to me. No. Whereas Chris as Kane feels like Seth to me. It's not like an imitation. It's not an impersonation of Seth, but it feels like Seth to me.
Well, there are a few scenes. I thought it was kind of strange that you meet repeatedly at a vegan restaurant.
Yeah.
Which
yeah.
like that doesn't make any sense unless it's just a connection Suki-in had. And
incidentally, the actor who played the Joe character, his name was Eli Henry. But anyway.
Okay, yeah, and so in the same way that Joe doesn't feel like Joe to you in the film, Seth doesn't feel like Seth to me, you don't feel like you. Not knowing Suki-in well, I did feel like the actor who played Suki-in seemed to get something of her. Yeah, very much so, right? Yeah. And probably did that as part of her process to prepare for the character. But Joe's just kind of created as a joke. And we talked about that before. He was kind of there for comedy relief, and that was the intention. But there's a lot more to Joe than that. And there were certain things, and once again, I could just be nitpicky, but I think, when he says, my therapist said, like, Joe would never go to therapy.
Right.
And,
But it's a funny line.
Yeah, it is funny, and that's the thing. So what I was wondering was, do you want people to kind of come to this film having read the book and so knowing stuff coming to the film, or do you want them to just see the film completely on its own? And if you want them to see it completely on its own, I don't think there's enough context for either the relationship between yourself and Suki-in or the dynamics between you and your friends, the cartoonists. I don't think somebody just walking into that is going to get that.
You don't think they're going to get that Kane, Cecil, and Chester and Laura are friends?
No, they're friends, but like if one reads your comics, yours and Joe's and Seth's comics, you get a real sense of your dynamic and your history and whatever. And it's just the screen time they have to talk about stuff is way too fleeting for someone who doesn't know that stuff to get it, and it's passed over.
But what do they have to get beyond knowing that the four of us are friends?
Well, I think those are spaces, especially in your memoir, but also in the film, to discuss the dynamics of what you're embarking upon, which is leaving traditional relationships behind and then seeing sex workers. That's given a lot of space in your book, but in the film, so once again, that joke about Joe's therapist is used in service of that. It's just very rapid fire and very quick. So we get a sense of the fact that, and it's used humorously, and there is humor in it. I did laugh out at times in it, but I just felt like it was fleeting in the sense that within that same conversation, you also talk about women with daddy issues, right? And then men with mommy issues. And then the Laura character, who I understand is based on Gillian Tamaki or some version of Gillian Tamaki.
Sure. Kind of Gillian Tamaki, kind of Nina Bunjevac, maybe even... I mean, Suki-in wouldn't have known this, but do you know the cartoonist Rena Piccolo?
Yeah.
Yeah, she used to hang out with me, Seth, and Joe sometimes.
Oh, I had no idea, because her stuff is so different. It's so mainstream.
Yeah.
But nice person.
Very nice. But, the Laura character could kind of be Rena, like...
Oh, so. I figured, like, you'd pick... And once again, this is the weird thing, because as I told you today... I knew that actor back in the day. She participated in a couple of short films I made almost 20 years ago.
Right.
So to see her in your film was like, like a cartoon. My eyeballs just went gadoing. Like, is that her? But
Rebecca Applebaum as Laura in the film.
Yeah. I don't know if somebody watching that movie is going to understand why is she there. Like, the only reason I sort of had a context for it is because you told me in the past that there was a female character you were adding to your trio of characters that we know from the comics. So, and there's a little bit, once again, kind of like the fleeting kind of discussion with your seeing sex workers dynamic. There's a fleeting discussion given to the fact that she's frustrated that people aren't buying her comics, which I thought was really funny at the convention. And then later, many years later, people are buying her comics because things have changed in terms of, women buying comics and graphic novels and that kind of thing. But it's so fleeting that I honestly don't know if somebody would be able to watch that film and get that.
You don't. It seems to me like people will understand the dialogue that the Laura character is saying, like that. She's a little bit miffed that her work isn't as popular as maybe it should be. I think the audience will understand that. Oh, and I did want to add something, just for clarity's sake. When you say that character is maybe based on Mariko Tamaki,
I said Jillian, but
yes, you did, and that's what I intended to say. My apologies to Mariko and Jillian for getting them mixed up there. I'm friendly with Jillian. I like her, but we're not we're not good friends. We don't hang out or anything. Okay. Whereas Nina, I have hung, like I'm good friends with Nina, and Rena, we really did hang out. But anyway, just for the sake of clarification.
No, fair enough. Yeah, so I don't know. There's a kind of there's a really interesting question there, because what you have is you have your real life, you transpose that to comics, and I don't know what else has been changed, but for example, Denise's name has been changed.
Yeah.
And when you did the comics, you were very careful not to draw any of the sex workers' heads or faces.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's being taken by other people and then being transposed to film. So you get this really weird kind of translation of things. And it's a thing I remember thinking about even as far back as the 90s when I was reading Joe's comics, for example. And I should also mention, thank you for letting me read the latest issue of Peep Show, which has your work finishing Joe's final pages. But I remember back in the 90s when Joe had that great story where he meets the guy that he calls Andy, and Andy says, "I'm your biggest fan," and then, Joe's character in the comic is thinking about whether he can get together with Andy's girlfriend because they're having some issues. And then he does, the comic about it, and then he has the subsequent comic where he runs into them in the street, and mm-hmm. they're very upset about their depiction in the comic, and right. He says something like, "Yeah, but I drew you with dreadlocks." So signaling that there's all these weird iterations right. or translations. And like I mentioned to you, I've been thinking about it because I'm working on a novel about a cartoonist, and you read the first draft of that. I'm working on the third draft right now. And you said a couple of things that really made me think about changes. But one of the things you said is, there's this guy here, there's a character, it's Jim Halpern, who owns, Heritage Auctions, who I kind of show as part of this kind of cabal, and they do bad things, and you were like, you can't do that because this is a real guy, and yeah. he's not just that, but he's also very powerful, and it got me thinking. So then I have to start changing characters, because the only person I've got permission from to include in my book is yourself. Right. So oddly enough, like your film, the only character who's called the same as his real analog is Chester Brown.
Right.
And I asked you if my protagonist, who's a cartoonist, kind of like, I guess, the Laura character in your book, who kind of knows the Joe and the Seth character and the Chester character, but who kind of feels a bit like a hanger-on in my book, doesn't feel like he's, unlike the Laura character in the film, doesn't really feel like he's authentically part of that group, because you're so tight, mm-hmm. and because I based my understanding of you on your comics. I have to kind of figure out, what changes can I make, should I make, and even the names, it's so weird, but when I've changed Joe's name and I've changed Seth's name, they don't feel as real to me
Right.
right? So what I have to do is I have to kind of get into the flow of writing these characters in my current draft that I'm doing now, where there are their own characters, and I can't really worry about that correspondence to reality.
Can't you just call them Seth and Joe for the writing process, and then at the end, just like after all the drafts are over, then just change the names? Like,
No, I won't pretend I didn't think about that at one point, but no, it wouldn't work that way, because then what I would really be doing is writing Seth and Joe,
right.
or even yourself. And I can't really do that, is what I've kind of come to understand. As much as I would love to,
Okay.
I would love to do that as somebody who's been writing about comics and loving comics for a long time. I would love to write my own fictional tale set in the world of comics and comics creators that I love, but I just can't. And I have to kind of figure out, what do I want to say with this book, and I have to kind of try to do that as best I can. And one of the things that's kind of become a concern of mine is there seem to have been a number of deaths, right, in comics, that at least have affected me in a kind of a serious way. So there was Joe's death, and then there was Ed Piskor taking his life, and then most people won't know who Tom King is, but he was central to the Toronto Comic Jam here.
Yeah.
But he took his own life recently.
Yeah, such a shame. I love Tom.
Just to clarify, this is not the same Tom King who has written Batman. This Tom King was known in the Toronto comics community because he attended the monthly Toronto Comics Jam events, where people get together and draw comics.
And then a few days later, Bernie Burrow took his own life, right?
Yeah.
And so your character in the movie is actually wearing a Mouth Congress t-shirt.
Okay.
And see, you don't even know this, I realize now as I'm talking to you, but Tom was part of Mouth Congress.
Oh. Okay, you're right. I don't know that.
Yeah, that's Scott Thompson's band.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. Oh, I should have. Because I did know that Tom.
Yeah, Tom's told you about this when we hung out.
Yes, I knew Tom and Scott were connected. But yeah, I wasn't making all the connections, yeah.
So I was curious who picked that Mouth Congress t-shirt, because it's got a weird resonance now that Tom recently passed away, killed himself, and then your film's just come out.
Right.
So it's got this weird, like, cyclical resonance to see your character wearing that Mouth Congress. So that wasn't your choice, obviously.
It wasn't mine. I'm guessing it was Sukian's. I mean, Scott Thompson does a voice in the film.
No, I didn't know that. Who does he do?
You remember so the Chester character is reading that book that kind of gives him tips on how to approach escorts. So that's read by Scott Thompson.
And so why did you get him just for like that?
I don't know. It wasn't my choice. I mean, I'm
Sukian
glad.
good friends with him? Is that why she...
Sukian knows Scott, sure.
So that's probably why she used the t-shirt.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I think Scott does a great job reading those lines.
Well, Scott's always great. I mean, I'm also a big Kids in the Hall fan, so, there you go. But yeah, I mean, that's the weird thing. And so even, like, incorporating Joe's death, and Joe didn't kill himself. He had a heart attack, just in case people don't know that. So I was like, well, how am I going to do that? Because from the draft that you read, it was around the time COVID started. That was 2020. Joe died 2023, right? So, and then I thought, okay, what I'll do is, well, you read the book that's out now, Killing Shakespeare, and so I'm sorry I'm spoiling the end for people, but the characters come back and they've time traveled and it's a different reality.
Right.
So I said I'll set it in this different reality, and then this way I can change things like how I want. And so I start off with Joe passing, or my character, I'm calling him Thaddeus Luke. Why am I calling them that? Because Joe, Matt, two first names. Matthew is one of the Gospels in the Bible, so I thought pick Luke. Yeah. I'm not crazy about it. It feels fake to me. But this character dies before the pandemic, And then the novel starts off with a panel discussion at a Comic-Con here in Toronto. And my protagonist is there on the panel with yourself and Seth's character. And I'm calling Seth Osiris right now.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, but it feels just as fake as Cain to me, you know. But at least I feel like that's more, somewhat more in tune with Seth, because they're both Egyptian names. Yeah. And I certainly, like, I guess the point that I'm trying to make is I wouldn't make Seth a different ethnicity, because it's strange to see, you know, Laura in your film, whom I assume is supposed to be at least partly Asian, and then Seth being black, and then no real discussion of ethnicity. Same thing with Soo-Kin's character. There is a mention at one point where you say something about her mom or whatever, her not being close to her mom or something. Do you know the moment I'm talking about?
Yeah. She's having a fight with her boyfriend. I think this is the scene you're talking about. There's been a phone call. Apparently, the mother is on the phone. The boyfriend does it. Like Soo-Kin asks. I can't remember how much of this actually is in the scene, but because I know the scene as it was shot, you know, other different ways. But Soo-Kin is basically like, "Don't tell her I'm here." And the boyfriend apparently does indicate that the Sunny character is there, and so they get into an argument about it. Is that and I'm downstairs in the basement listening to all this. Is that the scene?
No, it's not that. It's something else, and I'm sorry I'm not remembering it as like precisely as I should. But like, it's strange to me that Soo-Kin's ethnicity, because she is played by an Asian actor in the film, right, doesn't ever get like mentioned or come into play. Like it's I don't know, it's strange to me. It's just strange that you can kind of cast people but like sort of like not mention that at all. Just like, it's strange.
I don't know, like, I mean, when we're hanging out together, how much would we talk about your Sri Lankan background? I mean, it would come up from time to time, but it's not like a constant thing that we would talk about, you know?
Yeah, because I think I'd feel like, definitely when I met you and Seth back in the 90s, I never would have talked about it because it never really felt like I could talk about that aspect of my life. But even when we hang out now, I don't know that, you know, you understand why. So I like, for example, you know, I'm not feeling great about my relationship with my parents right now, for example. But that's not something I'd bring up because I guess I don't want to kind of be vulnerable in that particular way. I think we talk about relationships because that's common ground. We definitely talk about comics. We talk about movies. We might talk about people we know. But yeah, so I think it's just, whereas if I was hanging out with somebody who we talked about ethnic stuff, then I would maybe bring that up. I don't know, but it's definitely obviously in my writing, and you've read most of my writing, I think, if not all of it. So, you know, it's important to me, but
I don't know. I can see friends where one of them happens to be black and the others happen to be not black, just at least in certain conversations, it not coming up. Like, it doesn't, like, it would seem kind of forced and contrived to bring that up, to insert that into the conversation, it seems to me. But I don't know, maybe Soo-Kin should have made some reference to the Cain character being black. That would have felt weird to me. Like, I think Chris just does a great job playing Seth, and that's all that's required, in my opinion. But hey, I'm happy with the film. I think Soo-Kin did a great job. I'm going to be defending her. But.
Yeah, no, please defend her, because, I mean, once again, I've seen it once at this point, and these are just, you know, thoughts that are rolling off. But, like, in that discussion where, you know, they talk about daddy issues and mommy issues,
right.
The Laura character, I think, makes a crack about, the Seth character only getting women that seem to have daddy issues, and they're drawn to him because of the clothing he wears. And they mentioned the fedora, and I just couldn't see that conversation happening with Seth. I mean, not that I really know anything about his relationships, but I didn't think that was why he was, scoring with women. My understanding of why he was scoring with women was because he was very charming and articulate, and he had charisma, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So there's a lot of stuff that's played for jokes that kind of seem funny.
But I mean, obviously Laura's a fictional character.
Yeah.
But is there anything wrong with having a fictional character tease another character? Like, basically, it doesn't have to be true that this is why the Kane character wears a hat. Like, it's just two characters who are friends teasing each other.
Yeah, I just wish all of that had been fleshed out more.
Right.
Same thing with Sukien's character. It just seems that there's a kind of a quick, like, scattershot look at her relationships. I like the parallel structure. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's not in your book, obviously.
Yeah.
But I just feel like some more understanding of those dynamics, those characters, the reasons, their motivations would have really kind of be more satisfying, especially for the viewer who does not know the comics, who does not know the people that these characters are based on.
Yeah, I thought that was a clever way for, referring specifically to that parallel structure you were just talking about, that was a clever way for Sukien to deal with the book's anti-romance themes, rather than having me talk about it, which I do in the book endlessly. She shows her bad relationships, and then that gets contrasted with me seeing the sex workers and what goes on there, which isn't always positive. So you're kind of seeing, that romance isn't always, flowers and roses. Well,
No, absolutely. And if anything, I think Sukien takes a kind of like a indie comedic kind of look at the failings rather than, it's not a drama so much as some sort of light satire, I think, or some sort of... I mean, there is a fair amount of 90s nostalgia in it, so in some ways it's reminiscent of kind of quirky 90s movies, like maybe like Party Girl or something.
Okay, yeah, I don't know where you'd slot it genre-wise. It's being called a dramedy, and I don't know if that's an appropriate term or not.
I hate that term,
Yeah.
because it means nothing.
Right.
Anyway, but I think if anything, if I can take any insight, and I told you, I don't really want to review the film because I don't think I could do it objectively, but there is an interesting kind of moment when the guy she seems to have clicked with towards the end of the film says to her, "Look, I'm saying this out of love, but you can't focus on anything, and you've got to,
Right.
And there's a nice little connection between that and her dissatisfaction of working at the music station where she's working. I forget what it's called in the film.
Max Music.
Max Music. In real life, it was Much Music. And is that supposed to be Moses Neighbor on the exercise bike?
No.
Oh, okay. It's like, what is an exercise? Like, this is so weird. But...
It's supposed to be just some random producer. Like, there were lots of producers at Much Music. So.
Okay, so he says that to her, and I thought that's interesting because
the part about her gnawing her thumbs off. You just talking about the boyfriend.
Yeah, just herself not being able to focus on things, because to me the film is a bit like that. It's great filmically in terms of it's not slow. It doesn't get bogged down. Great use of camera, editing, and so on. But also, like it just doesn't get at some of the subtopics as much as I'd like, whether they be cartooning the characters themselves, the dynamics, or the sex work and the relationships. But that aside, you obviously seem very happy with it.
Oh, I'm very happy
And
with it. Yeah, totally.
That's what's important.
Coming up, in retrospect, would Brown still have gotten into a paid-for relationship if he could do it over? Has his philosophy about romantic relationships changed? The surprising model for Brown's art style in paying for it, and more. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon. Follow the link to Amazon from there and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting this show every week. We really appreciate your support.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarterbin podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarterbin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarterbin podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarterbin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
Okay, so we're back. So you said you don't mind saying how old you are?
Right. 64.
Okay, so obviously sex is still important to you, and I find it really interesting that I think there were like sort of two phases of me knowing you. One was the phase of in the 90s through Seth, and we never talked.
Okay.
Right? That I remember. Anyway, you were just there when I would meet Seth and you. And then there was that phase where we got to know each other around 2011, because you were nice enough to check out my first book, and you said you liked it. Mm-hmm. And then maybe a couple of years later, I was teaching that class on comics, and you visited my students, but we would hang out like periodically then, right? And I remember when you read my book, my first book, and this kind of nicely ties to ethnicity, because you said, you asked me, like, how come you don't really talk about ethnicity when we hang out and whatever. But that book is very much about ethnicity.
Yeah.
But what I was trying to deal with was the awkwardness of growing up in a culture where you're not really taught to date. Dating is not allowed. And so you grow up, and then there's this pressure to find a mate, to get married. And then you're kind of caught between two cultures and two ideas of conjunction, right? And what you had suggested after reading my book is maybe that I try seeing a sex worker.
Right.
And I said, I can't do that.
Right.
Like, now that I'm older, like many years have passed, I sort of understand that for myself, not only could I not do that, that's not really desirable. Like, that's not, I think, something that would solve any problem I have. And just to be completely transparent, I'm now single. I'm close to 50 years old, so I'm definitely not young anymore. As I get older, I think the desire for sex is not, or the need or the urgency for sex is not what it once used to be. So I think I've kind of adopted a different solution than yourself, which is I just don't want it as much or as badly or whatever. And I think that's because I understand myself better, but also biologically, like, just the mellowing out happens. Whereas for you, I don't think it has in the same way.
I mean, probably the the desire for sex isn't as intense as it would have been in my teenage years, in my 20s, in my 30s. Yeah, you kind of mellow out. But even so, even just obviously I'm having sex with Denise. But
Are you still doing the thing where you mathematically portion out how much money you have and you say, I can do this every 2 weeks?
Oh, yeah.
And is 2 weeks kind of the interval, or?
Like approximately. Like we don't. 2 weeks is an average. Like it depends on her schedule, it depends on my schedule, what's going on. We have to work out when we get together. But 2 weeks is the average, and it's based on how much I can afford. But
you do hang out with Denise when it's not for that purpose too, right?
Yeah, there's some off the clock getting together interaction occasionally, but I mean we're getting together every 2 weeks anyway, so it's not like we need that much extra time outside. But we go and do stuff occasionally. We'd go and have a meal somewhere, or see a movie or whatever. Like we do those sorts of things from time to time. So anyway, so I mean, sex is obviously a big part of our relationship, but to me, like, the big part about sex now is just like the physical contact with another person, like just skin to skin contact, just the comfort that brings. It's really nice just being intimate with another person and just having that closeness with them, especially someone you've known that many years, 21 years, and you're just really comfortable with that person.
Well, I don't want to fall in the role of somebody like Seth, who is like sort of disagreeing with you, or even the film itself, which seems to kind of disagree with your thesis in the book to some degree. But what you just said seems to suggest that the value is not just in the physical contact, not just in any physical contact, but in the fact that you have a history that's being built up, right? And that connection or that bond that's being built up. Because I guess one could say, well, if all you want is skin-to-skin contact, couldn't just seeing anybody suffice, or even going to have a regular massage, not a sexual massage, but a regular massage, just fulfill that need?
Yeah, the fact that I've known Denise this many years, it makes it feel much more significant. Like, it would be weird now, like going to see a sex worker for the first time. I suppose things could end between me and Denise, and I've wondered if that does happen for whatever reason. Maybe she meets a guy that she's really in love with or whatever, and she wants to end a relationship with me, and that would be fine if that happened. Like,
would it really be fine? I feel like it would be very hard.
Yeah. I would understand, and I could deal with it. It would be, I don't think it would be that much more difficult than it was when things ended between me and Sukhin, sexually ended between me and Sukhin.
And the film seems to suggest that you're best friends, which I know you're very close friends, so that seems to be fine.
Right. Best friends with Sukhin?
Yeah.
Sukhin and I are very close.
So maybe you and Denise would still be good friends, maybe.
Maybe. I don't know. Like, it, and it, if the reason that we stopped seeing each other was that she started up with another guy, I would understand if she can't hold on to her relationship with me. I would hope it would be nice if things did end on the sexual level with Denise, if we remained friends. But if it doesn't happen, if it couldn't happen, then whatever, I'd deal with it. I was going somewhere with that, but I got
That's okay.
lost.
I mean, I've got lots of ideas on this particular topic. So, I mean, one thing I'd like to talk about is that relationships are important, but also there seems to be a lot of difficulty in terms of, I think, men and women kind of understanding or having stable, harmonious relationships or seeing eye to eye. And I see that not just in your work, but also in Joe's work. And just having read Bernie Moreau's book Together, I feel bad, but I never read anything of Bernie, so I read this after he passed away. That's kind of what it deals with.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about his book is that he's got a cartoonist as the main character, so we can't help but wonder how much of that is based on his own life. And he's got some autobiographical aspects, such as going to the comic jam and drawing pages with friends, and you have that in your film, not at the jam, but with your friends, drawing a page together. But he has a very different kind of solution, obviously, because, I mean, his book starts off like an earnest kind of look at that question, and then by the end it's kind of a joke, because the girlfriend that his protagonist is struggling with ends up being pretty awful, and it's right, and it's just it just gets funnier and funnier because they're so awful.
Yeah, I've read the book. Isn't there some kind of villain, and she sides with the villain, or she works for the villain, or something? Or...
No, there's like some guy who's obsessed with her, and he's hilarious because he's off his meds, and he's just really out there. He's really nuts. But by the end, like, she says she's taking this job up north, and he hears that she's just moved in with somebody like a week after she's moved. So the idea is that there are some people who are givers and takers, and his protagonist is a giver, the girlfriend is a taker. But because the protagonist is so nice, and that is where it kind of crosses over with your character in the film, because the characters are constantly talking about how your character in the film is so accommodating and is so nice that, you know, like in the film, your character puts up with Sukin's character seeing somebody else while they're still living in the same house, and so on and so on. Right? So, but like the solution he comes up with at the end of To Get Her is that it's just better to be without a relationship.
Oh, really?
Or he doesn't say that. I think it says better to be alone, because he's got the dog, right? And they're very happy together. Better that than be with somebody who cannot give, who cannot reciprocate.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that might be true.
Yeah.
Or you could try and find someone you are compatible with. Or you could try paying for sex.
Well, that's what I'm getting at here, because I think I feel like, I mean, part of the reason I like your comics and Joe's comics is because I can relate to those aspects. Obviously not some of the other areas that you and Joe go to, but like, yeah, that real pain, that real difficulty of being able to connect. And I don't believe people in relationships are necessarily free from that pain, because they may be struggling with trying to make things work or trying to find you know, an authentic way forward with their mate. But it's really hard. It's really hard. I can't speak for people in gay relationships, but certainly in heterosexual relationships and just in general, like navigating those waters of meeting people, it's really difficult.
Yeah, and maintaining a relationship is really difficult. Like, finding someone to begin with is difficult, and then once you've found someone, maintaining that relationship over years is difficult. And I thought paying for sex, this is the solution. Like, it makes everything so much easier. But now I'm, you know, in this relationship with Denise, and it's lasted 21 years, and I hope it lasts another 21 years. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the fact that it's a paid-for relationship makes everything easy. Like, people have feelings, and feelings come up, or like emotions come up, and, you know, people's feelings get hurt. And you end up having arguments the same way that you do in, you know, non-paid relationships. And in a certain way, it's yeah. I thought everything was going to be easier. It's not all easier, but whatever. It's still a very satisfying relationship. In the main, I mean, occasionally, as I am just implied, there are arguments, there are fights, and one or the other of us, or maybe both of us, our feelings are hurt in the moment dealing with each other. But hey, I'm very happy with her. It probably wouldn't have lasted 21 years if it wasn't in fact, it definitely wouldn't have. Like, if this was the two of us with our two personalities, our two very different personalities, if this had somehow started out as a romantic relationship, it wouldn't have lasted even 3 years. It would not have lasted 21 years. It's because it's a paid-for relationship that it has lasted this long. But even so, stuff comes up. It doesn't smooth. Money doesn't smooth out everything, but I guess it helps to some degree.
Yeah, so in that second phase of me knowing you, I've seen echoes of that when we've talked. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question to you is, if you could go back, would you do things differently, or has your view, like, say, as opposed to 2011 or whenever, when you said to me that maybe I should try seeing a sex worker, has your view changed?
Oh, if a guy's not having sex, I would recommend any guy that you go and pay for sex. Now, you have your reasons for not wanting to, and I totally respect that. That's fine. Like,
I guess I'm asking about yourself. Do you feel like if you could go back, would you do things differently?
No. I mean, I can see certain things I would do differently. Like, now I know certain trigger things to not say or do with Denise. So it would be easier getting along with her if I knew certain things in advance. Like, this is, if a conversation starts to go this way, that's bad news. Stay away from that topic or whatever. Like, I know her better now. So, from that point of view, of course, you're going to do things differently. But in general, no. I'm happy with my life the way it is. I'm happy with my friendships. I'm happy with my sexual relationship. I'm happy with Denise. I'm happy with the new movie. Like, almost everything about my life is good.
No, it seems great. I'm not suggesting in any way that you might be unhappy. I guess I'm asking, has your philosophy remained the same? Because when you released Paying for It, the first edition, you definitely did that as a kind of polemic.
Yeah.
It's different than your previous books, in terms of putting forward this kind of proposition about sex work being better in some ways than your conventional relationship. And much of the film, unlike the book, or the book, unlike the film rather, is you having conversation after conversation with people where you're arguing that point of view. So I was just wondering if at this point you feel as strongly about that.
I don't think that romantic love is a solid basis for a relationship. Obviously, sometimes it works out, and that's great for people when it does work out. But, marriage before the modern era was mostly based around financial reasons. Like, people tried to marry up, like, marry someone in a better social station than their family was from, or whatever, There were dowries and all that kind of stuff. Like, financial considerations were a big part of why you got married to a certain person. So this idea that you just married for love, it's a modern idea. And I don't think it's an improvement.
Sure. And biologically, they have found that passion or romance lasts 2 years
Right.
tops.
Right.
After that, you've got to have shared values and goals in common for a relationship to persist. I mean, one thing I was thinking about is that, say, for example, through the people I've seen at the Toronto Comic Jam, or just my sense of comics aficionados or fans or maybe cartoonists, is that maybe as a group of people, they do find it harder to navigate relationships, to, I don't know, successfully engage in romantic relationships. I'm not sure, but I mean, and I don't claim to be any better. Quite the opposite. Like, I've struggled with it myself, and I wonder if that's because, it's kind of like when I go to TIFF. As you know, I go to TIFF a lot, and I've been seeing a lot of cinephiles who go there a lot, and they seem unable to function in this kind of emotional way that's kind of functional. I don't know. Yeah. And I wonder if it's kind of something endemic to cartoonists, to writers, to cinephiles. I hate that I'm in the middle of that Venn diagram. But go on.
Or maybe it's just a general situation.
Yeah, that's what I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. And
Do
I'm
other
not,
people just dress it up better and pretend better?
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Like trying to think of who I know outside that world, the world of cartoonists, or maybe the world of cinephiles, or whatever.
Artists.
Yeah, like I can think of successful relationships, and I can think of, unsuccessful ones. I can think of people who are alone now. But yeah, I really am not like everyone does struggle with this issue, and even marriages that seem successful on the outside, are they really successful if you really knew what really happened in behind closed doors? It's so hard to say, but it's a general problem.
Yeah. For you, is there any tension in between your creative practice and pursuing relationships? I don't mean with Denise, I mean just in general. Because sometimes for creative people, I think that can really become a tension. Like, for example, the stereotypical problem with writers, and you see this in depictions of writers in movies and whatever, is that they use people from their own life.
Right.
And that's well,
yeah.
And I guess we've talked about Joe's comics kind of in that category. So do you think there's, forget that, like forget the using people's, things from people's lives, just in general being like a creative person, does that make it harder to commit to a relationship, whereas somebody who doesn't do that might be able to put all of their, or more of their energy into making a relationship work?
I'm just going through. I mean, I'm friends with and close friends with some people who aren't really creative, who don't, do art or write or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I'm able to be friends with those people and close friends. I don't know that it makes a difference whether, like, more of my friends are creative types of one sort or another. But that might be just because I'm in that milieu. That's who I meet. So I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that we'll, in this podcast, be able to determine the answer. I was just wondering if you'd seen any kind of correlation there, that sort of one exacts the price of a relationship when you're kind of committed to creating not dabbling, but you're actually like committed to making something work and come out creatively.
Right.
It might, and also because you kind of, what I'm thinking is maybe because you spend more time focusing on yourself as sort of the engine of that creative project, that that kind of takes more precedence than the idea of being in a kind of, partnership dynamic, which is about more than the two individual people. I don't know. But on the other hand, I just think sometimes, like, people are nuts. Like, the possibility of just successfully kind of coupling without, making mutual oversights about each other's, flaws or whatever, or just not pretending that, it's all rosy, and kind of ignoring some of the other stuff. I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, for me, I'd much rather be alone, I guess, than be in a relationship where I feel trapped, or which I feel is dysfunctional, or which I feel I'm being taken advantage of, or is injurious to my emotional and mental health. But I'm also very sensitive and aware of that kind of stuff, whereas other people might be able to, like, have it just be like water off a duck's back.
Yeah. Sure.
Hard to answer. Maybe I should just bring it back to the movie. In terms of the movie, okay, odd question, but I guess you probably thought about how much nudity to include in the film. And I thought it was interesting that with the actor who plays yourself, we see just the tip of the penis, but not like the full penis. Is it a fake tip?
No, you see, there's at least one scene where he's totally naked, and you see, you get to see his penis.
Oh, okay, to me it seemed like he was in shadow in that scene, and it wasn't as like. Whereas
I don't know, his penis is there.
Okay, so it is like his actual penis.
I believe there is a scene where there's a fake prosthetic penis.
Like when she's putting the
condom on.
The condom on, the very first sex worker that he's.
But I think that's the only scene where, like, other scenes where you see his penis, it's his real penis.
Yeah. Okay. Was it hard to kind of arrive at these decisions? And I guess I should also ask you, when you draw yourself naked in your own comics, is that kind of hard to do?
No. Yeah, I mean, when you do autobiographical stuff, you're putting yourself out there, and there's lots of stuff in my books that felt more touchy or revealing than just drawing my penis. Like, that almost felt like nothing. Like, it's just
What would be an example of something that feels more revealing? Are you talking about fights that you have with your partners?
Yeah. Well, maybe, or, like, treating my mother poorly. Like, that's, I'm ashamed of that, of how I treated my mother, and that I wasn't a more loving son. But
I'm dealing with that right now.
Right.
Like today.
Right.
That's what I woke up like worrying about.
Yeah.
Not that I feel like I have any answers, but I don't remember. Like, I'm assuming you're talking about I never
liked you.
Yeah. But in the book, from what I can remember, you don't seem to include commentary about you feeling bad about the way you treated your mom at the time. You just kind of show it.
Yeah, I show myself being a total selfish teenage prick,
So how do you process this kind of stuff? Like, I guess that's so far in the past, but if you want to use that one as an example, how do you say, I've got this emotion, I've got this memory, I've got this relationship with my mother. How do you go about translating that into a comic scene?
Well, I was just trying to show it as honestly as I could, and I guess that was my way of dealing with it, is, you know, saying to the world, this is how I treated my mother, and I'm not happy about it, I'm not proud of it, like, this was not good behavior on my part. And yeah.
That's interesting because, sometimes you read autobiographical comics, right? And they've got very heavy narration, first person narration. Right. And they sort of tell you
right.
what to think and what to feel, whereas you really don't do that. So even though I liked reading I Never Really Liked You, I think it's only at this moment that I understand that you wanted the reader to feel that. I mean, I certainly did feel those uncomfortable things at the time, but I didn't know if I should also just feel like sympathetic for yourself as a teenager because your mother is having difficulties and so therefore maybe is not there in some ways that another mother might be. Or I guess maybe both of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I was dealing with my mother's stuff too, but I think things were worse for her. Like, she was struggling with her own, mental health, problems. But she was still a great mom. Like, she was a very loving person. Whereas, and she gave me, like, she showed me as much love for me as she could. Like, if there's someone I see as more to blame in that situation, it's me.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, years after my reading it, that we're kind of discussing that particular aspect of it. But when you do Paying for It, which now is pretty old, the emotionality is stripped down even more. Mm-hmm. It's like you just kind of go for this very bare, dry bone kind of, conversation. Like, I kind of got the feeling maybe you write a script and you pare it down and you pare it down and you pare it down to the essentials. Mm-hmm. So how do you feel now about, like, aesthetics? Because it's been a really long time since you've released a long work. I've seen your mini comics. Mm-hmm. Which sort of take you somewhere else because they're dealing with biblical stories or what have you, or like, folk tales or whatever. So how do you feel now about, like, doing autobiographical stuff if you were to work on something now and release it?
I think my approach would be similar to the way it was in Paying for It. I don't go in for exaggerating emotion. I mean, I've talked about it a lot in interviews. Like, the big influence on my approach in comics is actually a cinematic one. It's the films of Robert Bresson.
Yeah, I was wondering that. Yeah, because we talked about that film, A Man
Who Escaped.
A Man Who Escaped, that I went to go see recently, and somebody else that we knew had told me that was maybe your favorite film, and you said it was either that or another Bresson one. And he is very spare, for sure.
Yeah. Did you like A Man Who Escaped?
I did not.
Really?
I did not. And it's weird because I want to like Bresson more because I quite like Paul Schrader, and Bresson is the biggest influence on Schrader.
Sure.
But both of them have this thing where they do this like spiritual thing at the end, and especially in A Man Escaped, I did not feel that at all.
Okay.
I just felt like the whole thing was forced for me. But like another filmmaker that I really like, I'm going to be starting a course that I'm teaching on his movie soon, is Scorsese. And you and I went to go see Killers of the Flower Moon. You, I don't think, liked it at all. But I don't think that's a typical, like, Scorsese film. But many of his films do have bursting emotion, and he looks for emotion to join scenes and to shape scenes, which I love. Do you like that at all, or do you hate that?
I mean, if it if we're talking about preference, I prefer Bresson over Scorsese. Scorsese's done some terrific films that I love. But yeah, I like that.
So you do like Scorsese, yeah.
I can like things he's done. It's just he does tend to be excessive with those emotions.
Yeah, yeah, which I love.
Right.
And I guess I was a bit surprised you liked my first book because I think it's more on the emotional side.
Okay.
But maybe you just responded to the problems of not knowing how to navigate dating or what have you. But just to come back to Bresson, can you talk a little bit more about what it is that you like about him besides the spare emotion, I guess?
Yeah. Nothing seems excessive about it. Like so much of film, it's like they're throwing too much at you. The acting's it's too overdone. There's this swelling music all the time that's trying to tell you what to feel. Everything just seems excessive, whereas Bresson's got it right. Like everything pared down, like just simplicity and everything feels direct and you know, when he uses music, he uses music sparingly but very well, and it's just, it feels way different. Yeah. I remember, what was it? It might have been the first time I saw A Man Escaped. It was some Bresson film. I was with my friend Akemi. We went to see 2 films in one night. We went to see a Bresson film, maybe it was A Man Escaped, and then after that we saw I think it was Mickey Rourke in 9.5 Weeks, and I loved the Bresson film, and then the 9.5 Weeks just seemed so disgusting in comparison, so over the top and just it felt But
9.5 Weeks is not a good film.
Yeah, it's not a good film. Sure.
Whereas lots of people love Bresson, so like I think there is a consensus that he is a great artist.
Right, but 9.5 Weeks feels so similar to so much of what Hollywood produces.
Sure, yeah, no question. So, do you feel that, like, do you have a preference for works of art that are pared down, that are kind of consciously brought to that kind of mode, like a Bressonian mode or like your mode? Or do you just internally, intuitively, instinctively feel that emotions are not that over-flourished to begin with? Do you just in yourself feel that they are the way you represent them, or do you arrive at that?
I don't want to say that I can't respond to a work or a story that does focus on emotion and does, like a melodrama. There are really good melodramas out there that I have enjoyed. One of my favorite comics is Little Orphan Annie, and that's full of melodrama.
Right.
Although
unbursting emotion and sentimentality.
Yes.
We talked about this.
Yes. Although even there, like the way he draws everything, that's very pared down. Sure. Even if there's melodrama in the story, there is so many other cartoonists would have portrayed that in a different way, and it would have felt excessive just because you're drawing so much of what cartoonists do feels to me like bad acting, like the cartooning equivalent of bad acting, where you're having these exaggerated facial expressions on characters, and you see none of that in Little Orphan Annie, or very little. I guess it's sometimes you do, but not the way you do with other cartoonists.
Right, but the same time, I don't think Harold Gray was necessarily saying to himself, let me pare things down as much as possible. I think, and I'm just guessing here, you would know better than I do, but he was just like, let me tell my story. And then he would have a way of cartooning that was natural to him.
Yeah. He was just going by instinct, or, his natural inclinations as far as how to present a story. And it wasn't, he probably was not consciously trying to pare things down. He had his talents as an artist, and he couldn't draw as well as someone like, say, Alex Raymond or whoever. And perhaps if he drew like Alex Raymond, he would have, the actors would have been, or the characters would have been acting
more dramatic. But like, I guess what I was asking is, it's not like you have this natural kind of sense of a scene when you're cartooning or you're writing, and it's full of emotion, and you're like, okay, let me cut that out, let me cut that out, let me pare down, let me pare down. You just naturally do that.
It's not all natural. I mean, I know what I think makes for good storytelling, and like there will be a first draft where you're just writing, or you're just drawing, and you go back in and you realize this expression is overdone, or this sentence where this character expresses this doesn't need to be there. I mean, there's an editing process where you're trying to achieve what you think should be achieved.
Yeah, but it sounds, from what you're saying, that it's closer to your finished product.
Maybe.
Yeah, as opposed to, I guess I should ask you, do you want to talk about anything that you're working on for the future, or what does...
Yeah, I mean, I've got a big book on the go. The script's all done. So, but it's still years off. Like, it's still years from being finished.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about the details of that project, but is your cartooning, or the mode in which you're going to present that, going to change significantly from your previous work?
That's still I'm still figuring that out.
Sure. And I guess some of that must be instinctive. It can't all just be like calculated, right? Like how you want to draw it and the style you want to use. And
well, you've got to go in. I mean, in the new edition of Paying for It, I print several pages where I began drawing the book one way. Like, I was drawing the characters in what I thought of as a more realistic style, and I was drawing square panels, and just the shape of the panels makes such a difference. And then I did not like how it was looking, and I had drawn something like maybe 30 or 40 pages that way, and I was like, I'm not happy with this, I gotta scrap these. And so you can see what they look like, or some sample pages in this new edition of Paying for It. And then I began drawing the book over. Actually, a big influence on the new style was, and now I'm forgetting the artist's name. His book is over here. I was drawing Paying for It. Do you know Fletcher Hanks' work?
I know of Fletcher Hanks. I don't know it well. I know the Stardust versus, I forget the bad guy's name, but that's pretty famous, right?
Yeah. So I read that book, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, it's I loved his style. Everything felt very stiff and unnatural, and I was like, this is how I want to draw Paying for It. Stiff and unnatural, not not the way I was trying to draw it, which was at least semi-realistic. So I started redrawing Paying for It that way, and drew maybe 20 pages, and then still wasn't quite happy, and then started redrawing it again, but much closer to the way I drew the Fletcher Hank style. And finally I got what I thought was the right balance, and that's what ended up in the book.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. Paying for It definitely feels much more mannered.
Yes, mannered is a good word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Louie Riel feels more mannered than the previous bit. Right. So I'm just kind of wondering if this next work, which I guess is years down the line,
right,
might also be just like a radical kind of shift away.
I don't think it's going to be that radical a shift.
And then you're going to do the mini comics, I guess, periodically until. Do you have an idea about releasing the mini comics as a compiled book or anything, or is that?
It'll probably happen at some point, but there's no rush for that.
Right, because right now the new thing is the Paying for It edition. That's the movie edition with the supplemental material and the new cover and so on. Yeah, I love that you use my quote on the back. It's hilarious. Yeah, so I guess at this point I should just ask, is there anything else you want to talk about? We've been talking for a while.
No, I guess that's fine like that.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks a lot for making the time and letting me, watch your movie, and
thank you, Koom.
All the best. Yeah, thanks.
Check the show notes for a link to the Toronto International Film Festival page about the Paying for It film. Koom has recently released a critically acclaimed novel called Killing Shakespeare. It's about 3 teenagers who travel in time to Shakespearean London and then get stuck there and have to adapt to life there. Follow the link in the show notes to buy either the paperback or digital edition. Thanks to our patrons for supporting Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and our other podcasts. To join them, go to patreon.com/deconcomics. Patrons get access to podcasts about the early years of The Amazing Spider-Man, Jim Starlin's run on Captain Marvel, and more. Are you making a comic? Send it to us and we'll do a Critiquing Comics episode about it. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. We now have a new contributing writer for our site. Check out Behind the Panels, Journey of a Comic Creator by Hernando Diaz at deconstructingcomics.com. Next week, Emmett and I are back at the Eternals discussion as we cover a very fun story in the 1977 annual, as well as issue 13 of the regular book. As always, Jack Kirby is just tossing off ideas that some creators would base a whole story around, but he'll show something for one scene and then it's off to the next idea. Eternals is hardly his best loved work, but we're coming to find it to be underappreciated. Join us for more Eternals talk next week. Until then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.